Kia ora, daja hao. And can I just acknowledge Carolyn Tremaine, CEO and Controller of New Zealand Customs Service. Can I acknowledge so many of the important people in this room for New Zealand's China and Asia capability. I think about Tony Brown here, who served this government in many different guises as ambassador to Asian countries. He's an NZAL ambassador. We're making sure that we get the best out of the wisdom of these people, and also he's seated next to Wen Poles, who's going to be speaking today, Consul General to Shanghai, and she'll be speaking today about the use of diplomacy to communicate on behalf of New Zealand. Can I also acknowledge Al Morrison? It's great to have you here, Al. I acknowledge all of the Asian media who are here. Can I acknowledge Ming Lim Pollard from the BNZ, who's one of our key sponsors. Ming, you should get up. She's the CEO of the investment branch. Can I also acknowledge Karinia Lee? Could you stand up? And also Preeti, both of you. They are New Zealand Asian Leaders staff. So if you're interested in mentoring or if you're interested in becoming a member, those are the people to talk to. Look, before I introduce the rest of the lineup and get some feedback, there are some important things that I want to say in terms of setting the scene, because we've got a lot of Asian media who've made a big effort to be here today. So they've made a big effort to be here today, and I salute you. We'll get you up and have an opportunity to speak. We'll also get Laura up from NZME. But I wanted to set the scene because the superdiversity stocktake is finished. We finished it on Monday morning. The team flagged out about 7 p.m. on Sunday night, and they recommenced at 5 a.m. It's done. It's gone to Design Works, and it's gone off to be printed. By the 3rd of November, it will be up. And I can't tell you the rankings, but I can say that New Zealand Customs is hosting this because it has enlightened leadership, and that is reflected in the results of the government superdiversity stocktake, Carolyn. But I want to talk to you because in the stocktake I really only talk about communicating to customers. I don't really talk about communicating to citizens. And frankly, communicating to citizens, as Carolyn said, is actually much harder. The reason is because when you're communicating to business customers, it's easier. You've got something, they want it. There's a value add to them. They'll get some benefit from it, some pleasure from it, they'll make some money from it. But when you're the government communicating about how you might be prosecuted if you bring the wrong sorts of things across the border, about the fact that you might have to vote, and about compulsory registration or about referenda. I forgot to acknowledge Lewis. Lewis, you need to stand up. IPANS has been an outstanding partner of New Zealand Asian Leaders. Thank you very much for all your assistance, particularly with getting the public service events up. Thank you, Lewis. And so really the issue then is how do we engage, because we have obligations to ensure that we in the public service are engaging all New Zealanders. It's not enough to say, well, yeah, look, we're out there, we've got a campaign, and you know, we're doing the stock standard campaign we've always done, and we hope we manage to get all of the key people that we should be getting. Well, let me tell you, because I'm now reading to you from the superdiversity stocktake, this is some of the stuff in it. The first thing I want to talk to you about is, of course, this very important piece of work that's been done by Niche Media. Now, it's a specialist multicultural marketing firm. They did this research. It's commissioned along with the Office of Ethnic Communities. And this determines whether or not it really is true that Asian New Zealanders and Pacifica New Zealanders and Maori New Zealanders access the ethnic media. May, come on, a lot of them speak English. I mean, they just read the normal media sources, don't they? Why on earth do we need to go to ethnic media? Well, actually, the results are quite stunning. This is a survey on the media consumption habits of Indians, Chinese, Pacific and Korean communities in Auckland. You'll find something very similar if you look at Maori. What this shows you is that the consumption patterns are really, really high. The results indicated that the consumption of ethnic media is very high in communities where ethnic options are available. This was the case even with migrants who've been living in New Zealand for long periods of time. For example, in terms of the Chinese community, which accesses a range of media types, including radio, print, television, online and social media, and they're all represented here today, what you'll find is that 78% of those surveyed consumed at least half of their media in Mandarin or Cantonese, and 76% preferred their advertising in Mandarin or Cantonese. For the Indian, Pacific and Korean respondents, this figure ranged from 56 to 78%. 18% of the Indian respondents preferred their advertising in Hindi or Punjabi. And we've got Indian media here today. 32% of Pacifica respondents preferred their advertising in Samoan or Tongan. 81% of Korean respondents preferred their advertising to be in Korean. I could go on, but there's one key takeout from here. If you are not advertising in the ethnic media, you are not reaching your target group, because even those who've lived in New Zealand a long time and can speak English are still getting a lot of their information through ethnic media, or the ethnic media are nodding their heads. They're very happy to see you after this. But what I'm really saying to you is that if you have a responsibility to consult all New Zealanders, whether that be in policy reform or law reform, if you have an obligation to go out there and make sure that your services are available to all New Zealanders, and that all New Zealanders are capable of understanding what is available to them, then if you are not accessing the Asian media to put your message across, and you are not reaching all Asian New Zealanders and all New Zealanders. That's point number one. Point number two, linguistic diversity. Carolyn's already talked about the extent to which the population is changing. You know most of the new migrants are going to Auckland and Christchurch at the moment. You know that Wellington mainly has second and third generation, or 1.5 generation New Zealanders, migrants like me. You also know that it's diffusing throughout New Zealand. Wardlow Friesen, by the way, has just done another study. He's the guy who did the ethnoburbs in Auckland. Very significant. There's a piece in here about how ethnoburbs now, which are key constituents in Auckland, some with over 60% Asian or other ethnicities, really has much greater political power. Because if you're in the MP and there are 40% of the cabinets now in Auckland, then you're going to be pretty responsive to your electorate, and a lot of those electorates are looking highly ethnic. There are 160 languages now spoken in New Zealand, and the last thing I'm going to finish off with is to talk to you about the second paper that I've done. We've done two papers at the Superdiversity Centre. One is this big moa called the stock take, but the other one is about the impact on the elections. And what I'm trying to tell you is that migrants don't vote very much. But if you're the Electoral Commission, or you've got a responsibility, like with the flag referendum, to make sure you're reaching all New Zealanders, then you just have to factor in the fact that we now have 160 languages spoken in this country. And so if you are wanting to ensure that you are reaching most New Zealanders so that they can be part of democracy, and they can exercise their vote, and they can give legitimacy to the government for the things it wants to do, whether it be a flag or whether it's the voting system or whatever else we have a referenda on, then it's very important to think about systematically adopting a formal multicultural policy, which then requires you to think about policy systematically, about law systematically, as opposed to in an ad hoc fashion. And if there's one thing that we found lots of neat things in the Superdiversity stock take. I have given bouquets wherever I could. Let me tell you that the stock take was a revelation to me. There is a lot done in this country to get us ready for our superdiverse future. But if there's one thing we could do, it's important for the government to think about a formal multicultural policy on a bicultural base. That would then allow us to systematically think through these issues and systematically fund the thinking through and implementation of these issues. So when you go and look at the recommendations we've made in the electoral and referenda laws paper, what you'll find is that New Zealand has got a lot of really good measures to assist people with little or no English to vote, whether it be in local elections, central government elections, or in referenda. There's only one problem. It's completely ad hoc. And so, on the one hand, it says that you can get an interpreter, although actually only 5 were used in the last election. It says that you can get assistance to vote in the booth. And sometimes we even publish the promotional material about the referenda. I just spoke to the flag referenda people yesterday, and also in the general elections. We had publications in 25 languages, but the trouble is the ballot paper's in English. And also the electoral officers are able to ask you, hello, are you really Sue Smith? and you're supposed to be able to reply. Sometimes you're required to provide a written reply. So, you know, we give with one hand, we take with another. And those are all issues that every policy person in this room needs to think about. Because in terms of carrying out your job and thinking about the issues that superdiversity brings for government, there are very real issues about whether or not we can now communicate. I won't go through the stats except to say that it's 160 languages. And if you're wanting now to communicate with most New Zealanders, you would have to do it in Hindi, you'd have to do it in Mandarin, you'd have to do it in Samoan, and you'd have to do it in Te Reo Māori. The third point I want to make is that communication is not just about interpreters, it's about culture. And New Zealand is undergoing the most dramatic and fast cultural evolution of any country in the world. The reason is because we have an extremely high rate of intermarriage. Now, Dr. Polly Atatoa-Carr, she's the Associate Director of the University of Auckland's longitudinal study, Growing Up in New Zealand, is tracking the development of nearly 7,000 children in the context of their diverse families and environments, from before their birth until they are young adults. This study is measuring how parents identify, self-prioritise their own ethnicity or ethnicities, and basically what you find here is just an extraordinarily high rate of intermarriage. The preliminary findings of the study revealed that half of the children involved in the study are identified by their parents as belonging to more than one ethnicity, and within specific ethnic groups, particularly Maori and Pacific groups, the diversity was even greater. For example, 83% of children who identified as Maori also identified with at least one other ethnic group. And so we know that one of the issues for New Zealand to think about, since we're number 4 in the peace statistics, is the fact that racial harmony is going to be challenged, and it's an issue for the Human Rights Commission. They're one of the sponsors, which allows us to provide the stock take for free. It's one of their roles. But one of the outliers is that Maori are disproportionately negative towards new migrants. So actually there won't be them and us, because we're all becoming us. There's a lot of intermarriage going on. But I've actually dedicated the stock take to my son, and I told him that yesterday, because he is the future face of New Zealand superdiversity. I wasn't born here, I was born in Taiwan. My husband wasn't born here, he was born in the UK, he's British. And of course, our Eurasian son, who is born here, is the future face of this country. But of course, if you, as government, are trying to sync with communicating with the average New Zealander, what is that? Well, it's changing. And as more and more intermarriage happens, there isn't just the stock standard Kiwi culture, there isn't just the stock standard Chinese or Indian or Korean culture or Maori culture or Pacifica culture. Actually, there's a range of cultures which are being blended. We're creating our own unique, super diverse country in the world, and that is of course really true. New Zealand is very unusual because of the fact that we have a much higher proportion of Indigenous peoples in our superdiversity than any other country in the world. Canadians 5%, US 5%, Aborigines 3%, New Zealand 16% growing. But as Carolyn said, by 2025 Asians are going to start to overtake Maori as the biggest group. So the key takeout for those of you who are here today is that these citizens that you are communicating to have changed, and therefore your methods need to change. And that really requires you to talk to your target market about what is actually having an impact on them and what is not. Most of them will tell you that they've got no idea what you're talking about because they haven't read what it is you put out there. You say, well, it's been out in the media, and they'll say, well, what media is that? Because actually what I discovered when I went to Auckland was all of these people access completely different media. They're reading things that I didn't know about. And a lot of the things that they're reading are here today. And so we will get them to stand up and introduce themselves.